So I looked down and there was a garter snake there. And I learned that it's a garter snake, not a gardener snake.
Yeah.
Did you know that?
I think so, yeah. Now that you're in the country, you'll be seeing snakes a lot.
I know. But did you know it's garter? Alrighty. Well, Jessica Yates, what is on your mind today? What do you want to discuss that's so important to you?
Well, I was talking to someone earlier about how realtors get paid, and there was a lot of confusion around it, so I thought maybe clarifying it would be a good idea.
Okay, let's do that. Ready, set, real estate. So Jessica, what was the client saying? They were confused about the pay and how it works for us or something?
Yeah, so they were talking to a few people, I guess, that worked at Century 21, and I think they thought that the realtors all get paid hourly, so they could just call whoever.
Yeah.
So sometimes people will say to me, when I ask, do you have a realtor? They'll say, oh, I've been talking to Brandon Timmons and, a few people at Century 21. And they think that's a good thing because we're all at the same brokerage.
Because we're on the same name or something.
That it's good for me to know that. And then I have to explain that, if they're going to have someone helping them, they're going to want to choose one person. Because although we work under the same brokerage and the same umbrella, we're all individually different with our own businesses, right? And I don't think that everyone understands that realtors do not get paid unless they sell you a house. So if you put your house on the market with a realtor, the only way that realtor is getting paid is if the house sells and closes. And if you're buying a house, the only way the realtor that's showing you houses is getting paid is if they sell you a house and it closes and you move in. And so I don't think a lot of people understand that. So that's where I think sometimes people will call a realtor, have that realtor show them 20 houses and, write up a bunch of offers, spend a bunch of time on them. And then sometimes they'll just go with somebody else.
They go to an open house or something and then they just write the offer through that agent. And then that agent's the one who would get paid because they did the offer and it goes through and stuff.
Right.
But they didn't mean to do anything wrong. They just didn't know that, that's how it works.
Right. They genuinely didn't know. So they could be working with you, looking at a bunch of houses. You're spending your time, your gas, everything on them. And then, they go to an open house without you. They meet an agent there. They tell that agent that, they love the house. That agent's like, do you want to do an offer or whatever? Yeah. They buy the house through them. And partially it's the realtor not explaining their role, which is one thing. But sometimes I think when you are explaining these things, the people are just quickly okay, I get it. I trust you. Let's move forward. What do we need to do? They're not really processing at all. Yeah. So a big part of it is the realtor's fault or whatever for not explaining the process properly to them.
You can put a lot of time and effort in to then just have someone, work with someone else in that moment where they put the contract together. Met at open house, the agent or something didn't know that they were working with you, and then they had the impression they had to offer something right there and then, which I have had happen, and then they offer on the house, and then they tell you hey, congrats, we found a house, and they're all happy, and it's you're happy for them, but you take that ownership that, hey, I should have explained to you now that pay is going to that realtor, not to me, even though I did all that work, I guess. Right. And also it's rare, I feel when that happens. I barely ever had it happen. It's very rare, but it can happen, and I have had it happen.
Yeah, and also being really specific, because I did have that happen years ago where I remember clients called me excited and said, Jess, we bought a house. And I was like, wait, what do you mean you bought a house? They're like, we bought a house, and they explained it to me. They're like, we're so pumped, our offer got accepted. I'm like, who did you do the offer with? And they said this random name. I'm like, where did they come from? They're like, oh, he works at your office. We met him at an open house. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, so they just didn't fully understand. I may not have explained it. I'm not really sure how I explained it to them. Maybe they thought, oh, he's with Century 21 too. It's fine. Once they realized, they did feel pretty bad. And I actually ended up listing that house they bought a few years later and selling it. Mm-hmm. But they genuinely just didn't understand. Didn't know Otherwise, they wouldn't have called me all excited that they bought a house. So I think it's important that the public knows, understands the clarity, and I'd
agree.
Same, yeah.
And also, you don't get paid until the very end.
Right.
You don't, if you are selling a house and you are unable to sell it and it expires, because every listing or house for sale, which is a listing, has a contract or a duration, and that duration might be 2 months, 3
Right.
months, and if unfortunately it didn't sell, then you don't get paid at all. Like
Right,
none of
and-
the marketing and all that effort and all that stuff there's no compensation there, which is fine. It's part of the way real estate works. And there's some examples of that too on the buying side with buyers, kind of like what we're saying, really, where you don't get paid until literally the deal closes at the very end, and that's like sometimes even a month after that. So you can help someone for like 6 months in a search, they buy a house, 3-month closing, another month after that, then you get paid after.
Right. And with listings too, you can have thousands of dollars into them with marketing, photos, video, staging, and it not sell, or they decide they want to use someone else.
Yeah.
So it's a huge risk as well, putting out all that money. You want to be sure of what you're getting into for the most part as a realtor. And that always sucks when that happens.
Yeah.
Especially if you have a few in a row, right? Like you could have thousands and thousands of dollars into 5 or 10 listings and not see a return at all.
I know. I had that kind of feeling about a month ago because I had 4 or 5 houses first. I think 4 at the same time. The one came in after one sold, so I always had like 4 at the same time. And they were taking longer to sell, and I'm like, oh my god, what if they don't sell? Like that sucks for the client. That sucks for all the money put into it. Like all getting here for everyone involved, right? Anyone that's offered on the house that thought they could have had it, and the transaction never came together. Like it's all the pay and compensations at the very end of all the work.
Well, I think it's one of the only it's one of the only businesses where
like you don't charge for your work done. You just it's based on the results at the end.
It's based on it is one of the only ones I can think of that you get paid based on the results at the end. Like, I mean, there are lots of other careers like that, but it's crazy to think that you put all this up front and they can, and also it kind of goes back to the realtor again, maybe not, maybe guiding them the right way to price that, like not always, but maybe not guiding them enough on, where the price needs to be or whatever.
It is kind of awkward. Like, how do you, if you're working with a buyer, say it's a first time buyer, and you don't know or foresee that they might go to an open house and write an offer with that agent on that house in that moment, they're at your office, so they generally just thought like you're going to get paid and everything's fine and dandy and you're happy, and it's not like it works differently than that. How would you even explain to someone? Because you'd have to foresee, like, hey, just by the way, in the unlikely event, you might just seem kind of weird, to just say that out of nowhere.
We normally do tell people, like, in a conversation with other information.
Yeah.
Like, we kind of lay out some points, like, if there's any houses you want to see, if we're the ones helping you, you're going to want to contact us.
Yeah, it's about the contact point, I guess.
Explaining to them, like, you don't want to go around telling a bunch of realtors, like, what you're pre-approved for and all that stuff. If we're working together, we know that information, nobody else.
Yeah, it's confidential.
And you don't need to be messaging other realtors on Facebook and stuff when you see their listings. Just come to us. We'll get the information for you. So just explaining it. I think maybe up front, some people are like, okay, what's with all this information?
Yeah.
But it is to guide them in the right direction. So it is helpful for them. And I think it's important to lay it all out for them so that they understand, because understandably, why would they understand? They're not in the industry. Yeah. So some people or some realtors might think, well, it was obvious. It's like, well, it wasn't to them though.
There's so much of that stuff with misinformation and stuff, I feel like, especially first-time buyers, just because they've never gone through it. You can't blame them. They don't teach us this stuff in school. So it's really hard just to expect, like, you shouldn't expect them to know these things. So how you communicate it, and it's smart that you do that and you're proactive in explaining that to them up front like that. So it's good because it is something that can easily just be a miscommunication thing, right?
And then also often they're confused about where the money comes from. So typically when somebody is listing their property, the seller is the one paying the commission that gets split between their realtor, the one who has the house for sale, and the buyer's realtor. I mean, there's other situations if it's like a private sale or whatever, but that's normally how that would work. And I often have buyers that are like, well, what do we pay you and when do we pay you? Like thinking they have to come up with additional funds at the end out of their pocket to pay me, not realizing that that portion of our paycheck is
coming from the seller. It's flowing from the seller to their
Right.
agent, from their agent sharing it with our office and then with us.
right.
That's
So they
exactly how
don't
it
need
works.
to worry about that actual cash
Yeah.
on hand to pay us.
One thing I do is explain to them the closing costs up front. Like when I go over process, closing costs, how the mortgage pre-approval works, what it is they're looking for in a house, closing costs, you touch on that kind of thing, lawyer fees, how we get paid, just clarify that, and then talk about land transfer tax and home inspection kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then it helps. Because yeah, it's tough for people just to know, because it's a very unusual job. It's a very unusual kind of pay structure because of that too. So it's almost better just to explain it. And it's, yeah, you got to be smart about how you explain it, because it might come across as like, why are you telling me that?
Yeah,
but it's
like that
well,
was-
oh, okay, I get it now. And
Yeah.
because then at least if they do decide to do that, then they understand what they're doing. Whether they want to or not, it's up to them, right? Versus
Yeah.
like an honest mistake where they're like, oh my God, oops. Like,
It's important
that's
that they
typically
know.
what happens when that
And
does happen. I find.
Even with sellers, sometimes they don't know. Like I'll be sitting at their table sometimes before we get to the part about when they pay and all that. And they will say like, so what do we pay you? Like, when do we pay?
Yeah,
And then
like
I
after the
explain-
visit or something, it's like, no, it's not till your house goes up, until it
Yeah.
sells, until it closes, and you move out of your house, and then the lawyer takes a cut of that money from the proceeds, and that goes to my office, me, other agent's office,
Which
the
is
other agent.
kind of nice for the seller because they're knowing like, oh, okay, so I'm only giving you money if I get results.
Exactly.
I mean, people can structure their contracts or whatever differently, but for the most part, it is that.
You only get paid if you provide the results. It sells,
Right.
and it sells. And if it sells, it means they signed a contract, so they're obviously satisfied with it, hopefully.
Yeah.
So then it's happy. It's like a happy ending. Like it's good in the end, right? Which is
Yeah.
good. So sweet, Jess.
Yeah,
I'm glad we shared that. Let's do another one.
for sure.